Good evening. Today is October 16th, 2021. I'm Robert Cressionnie.
I'm John Gatsis.
Welcome to America in Danger. Thanks for joining us tonight. You know, with everything going on right now, I just have to wonder if people out there are brain dead or simply so wrapped up in other aspects of their lives that they're not even looking at what's going on.
I think that's probably a little both. You know, there's a lot of brain dead folks out there.
Yeah, I think so. You know, we are right in the middle of a communist progressive.
Absolutely.
And I combine those two terms because the progressives are communists.
Yeah, it might even be redundant.
It is redundant,
yeah.
But you know, you have to clarify for people
That's
that
right.
they've simply renamed
That's
themselves.
correct.
They're no longer going by communists. They are progressives, but they are communists.
That's correct.
So it's communists / progressives. But we are right in the middle of a communist insurrection in this country.
And only one side is fighting.
Only one side is fighting, that's right. You know, we on the right, and I hate to use that spectrum, the left versus the right, I hate to use that, and we'll talk about that some more, but those of us who believe in the Constitution and a constitutional republic, which is what we have.
That's correct.
Simply, there are too few of us fighting this fight.
Yeah.
There are too few of us who are awake enough to understand what's going on and who have studied a little bit. I mean, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of study.
Well, it's like doing better than the public schools. I mean, you just don't have to do much, and you can read and write, and you're already far surpassing what they do in the public schools. You don't have to take you don't have to get a degree from the Kennedy School of Government, which wouldn't teach these things anyway, to understand basic constitutional principles. I mean, this is something they used to teach sixth graders in civics class. Okay, and we don't do that anymore. I mean, I don't feel like I have a particularly extensive or superior education on those issues. I just have done a little reading.
A little reading.
But in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you know, we have. Let me start with this. You know, we have this whole political spectrum that the commentators use on TV, the left versus the right.
Right.
Socialism on the left and Nazism.
Fascism on the right.
Fascism on the right.
Yeah, that's a whole false, thing.
Well, it is. It absolutely is, because the bottom line is this. Both socialism and both fascism are interpretations of communism.
Right.
They took, the people that founded these would take Benito Mussolini, Adolf Hitler, and other socialists around the world. They simply took the writings of Marx, interpreted in their own way, and called it fascism. The German Workers' Socialist Party.
Right. The German Workers' Social, or the German Socialist Workers' Party.
Yeah.
The National German Workers, Nazi, right.
Better known as the Nazis.
Yeah.
So they're simply interpretations of communism, and don't think that anarchy is anything new either, because anarchy is simply another interpretation of achieving communism. And you know, all of these things, communism, ultimately, which all of these things can be lumped in there because they're all subsets of that. They all plan, or they all push perpetual struggle.
Right.
Because that's what Marx believed would ultimately accomplish true communism.
Right, they want to foment perpetual struggle.
Foment perpetual struggle because it's easier to manipulate people when there's some sort of struggle. The rich against the poor, the middle class against the rich and the poor, all of these struggles, the black against the white, the gay against the straight. In Hitler's Nazi Germany, he simply played identity politics and identified the Jews as a focal point for pin-up frustration in the German people.
And it was politically speaking, it was the right choice for him to make, because Europe in general, I mean, they always act like the Nazis were this singular, unique entity that had this animus towards the Jews, but really, the Jews have been treated horribly in Europe throughout their history.
Europe,
Okay, so it wasn't, he was just doing it could have been much worse, and it could have happened in any of those countries there.
Absolutely.
Okay, and he chose that scapegoat for a number of reasons. You know, I have researched that question quite a lot. What was the source of his animus towards the Jews? It's very difficult to find a coherent answer. It's very difficult to find a coherent answer to that. Okay, I think it's what you just said. He saw them as a useful scapegoat because there is this generalized antipathy toward Judaism and towards Jews in particular in Europe throughout history, and he focused on that like a laser and exploited those resentments.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's exactly the same pattern we're observing here in this country.
It is.
Using different sets of identities.
Absolutely is. You know, the vaccinated against the unvaccinated. I mean, the unvaccinated, oh my God, they're evil people. They're killing people.
Right.
They're destroying this country because they won't take a vaccine that has like 16,000 deaths associated with it right now. So they're using the vaccinated and the unvaccinated.
Right, which is somewhat, I mean, there you could argue, well, but you have a choice about that. You don't have a choice about being a Jew. Right. That's an immutable characteristic. However, they're using this vaccinated thing to basically exercise authoritarianism and convince people that you're making an evil choice for not getting vaccinated.
Absolutely.
Even though you can't possibly hurt somebody. If everything they're telling us is true, the vaccine works, but you need me to get vaccinated to protect you from the unvaccinated people because the vaccine doesn't work, there's something wrong with your logic is failing in that argument.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
But they are using these various artificially created schisms among different groups in this country to pit them against one another. And that is the hallmark of these totalitarian movements.
It is. We see it with the black community. We see it with the middle class not wanting raised taxes, not wanting higher taxes.
Right.
Oh, we're evil because we're denying someone something that they don't have.
Well, this comes under the whole subheading, you know, this is probably a little tangential, but I think it plays into the overall discussion here of the political spectrum, and we should get back to that. Okay, but you have to define what a right is. Okay, and I think people are woefully undereducated about what comprises a right. And any right that requires another person to do something is not a right.
It's not a right.
Okay, that's you know,
you're exactly right.
That's right. I know I am on that point. I agree with myself. Once again, I agree with myself. You know, exactly. I mean, if you say a person has a right to medical care, that means that somebody else is obligated to work and perform and provide that medical care, okay, in the face of penalty by law. Okay, well, that's not a right. No. And the way I think of it, I always like to reduce things to their simplest form. Okay, if I'm on a desert island by myself, what are my rights? Okay, I don't have a right to medical care. No, you don't. I mean, because there's nobody there to provide it. I have a right to do what I can to take care of myself and to prevent injury or to you know treat a broken foot. But I don't have a right to somebody else's labor because it can't be brought to bear. Right. Well, that's how one should think about these things. Rights don't exist in the context of other people. They exist in the context of your natural existence in the world. Okay, and to the extent that your rights impinge on somebody else's rights, then that's where we have to talk about it in more detail. But a right, okay, is not something that is dependent on somebody else's action. Exactly. Okay, that's the fundamental. Exactly. You know, you go back to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yes. You know, there are people on the left especially who say, well, you know, everyone has a right to a house. Everyone has a right to a universal income. Right. Everyone has a right. Yes. Well, actually, you don't. You do not. Because if you have a right to a home without working for it, that means someone else worked for it. That means somebody else created. That's correct. That's exactly right. And you are so correct. And people need to understand that when people scream about, that's my right, that's my right. I have a right to this. I have a right to that. Does someone else have to put out labor for them to enjoy that right? Yeah. If so, then it's not really a right. It's not a right. It's absolutely not a right. Well, I think people confuse the right associated with pursuing a thing with the right to having it. I mean, the Second Amendment guarantees the right to own a firearm. It doesn't guarantee that the government is going to give you one. Exactly. You know, I mean, I wish it did because, you know, I've got one to add to my collection. Well, I'd be in that line all the time. That's right. I'd queue up in that line as often as I could. But you know, you were talking about the political spectrum. We started out. And the other thing I like to talk about, which I think might elucidate it for people, if you're going to say that communism represents the extreme left and fascism represents the extreme right, and these are both totalitarian, violent ideologies, largely sharing the same set of characteristics and goals and objectives, then where on that spectrum would you put a constitutional republic?
There you go.
There's no place to put it. That's because that spectrum is illogical. Okay?
It is.
The spectrum should be, and really is, for people who pay attention to these things and understand, the spectrum should be communism, socialism, fascism, any of these totalitarian, for that matter, monarchy could come under this rubric.
Absolutely.
Okay, all those represent the extreme left of the spectrum in the lexicon that we're talking about. Okay, the extreme right, no government at all. That would be anarchy. But as you pointed out, anarchy quickly it doesn't last very long. It's ephemeral at best and quickly snaps back to one of these things, and that's why the communists pursue it. But a constitutional republic lies somewhere just to the left of this anarchistic state. Okay, it severely limits government, provides people with the most liberty. It's not democracy. Democracy is way down here, a few steps removed from socialism.
Exactly.
What is democracy? It's 5 wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. And that's it. If you listen to what people talk about and the politicians and the talking heads today, that is really their understanding and their treatment of democracy. That's how they view it. And when all those Antifa thugs were marching in the streets, what was one of their chants? This is what democracy looks like. Do you remember those? Well, they're exactly right. That's exactly what democracy looks like. And you need to begin to understand the delineations between these various terms that people use, because they're purposely obfuscating the true meaning of these political terms that we use. They really are.
Well, let's talk about tyranny a little bit. Tyranny, most people have a basic understanding of what tyranny is. It is someone exercising authority over you and doing unjust things.
Capriciously.
All right, well, if you have a monarchy, then that's the tyranny of maybe one or a handful.
Right.
But if you have a majority doing the same thing, which is what we're seeing in Congress right now, then you have the tyranny of the majority.
That's right.
If they're doing things to you that are not right, that are not moral, that are illogical, that are destroying our way of life, that are raising your taxes beyond reasonable amounts, and are raising the cost of living, driving you, into poverty.
Right.
That is the tyranny of the majority, and that's what we're seeing in Congress right now. They do not have an overwhelming majority. It's not 90% saying, "Oh yeah, we need to spend this $3.5 trillion/$7 trillion spending jag." You have 51. You have 51% saying, "Yeah, we need to do this," to the 49%, and you know what? That's fighting words.
Well, that's right.
I'm sorry, that is fighting words.
Well, and that's what I meant earlier with my little analogy of 5 wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner.
Exactly.
Now,
that is a good analogy.
Well, the thing is, that's not an original thing.
I think Ben Franklin came up with that.
Right. Now,
somewhere in that time frame.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I think and this is difficult to elucidate these concepts sometimes, but I'm going to try. Again, the Constitution, its function is to check those majoritarian tyrannical impulses.
Yes, it is.
Okay? Nobody's saying that you shouldn't be voting and have your say. What we're saying is that the Constitution, it limits what can be voted on. The Constitution does not allow the people of this country to say, well, we're going to subject 49% of the population to our will. Well, if pure democracy is what you want, well, you could return to a state of slavery very easily by saying, you know what, the majority in this country want to reinstitute slavery for this class of people. Not necessarily African Americans, but anybody.
Right.
Okay, you could say, we're going to vote to enslave this class of people. That's the tyranny of the majority. That's democracy. The Constitution specifically proscribes, meaning prohibits, those types of things. And it lays out exactly what the government is allowed to do and what it is not allowed to do. And it's not allowed to do most things.
Well, that's right.
Okay.
It's not allowed to do many things it's already done.
That is where we are now.
Exactly.
Okay. We have a government that's being run essentially like a top-down monarchy. We have a presidency, this executive branch that has become so large and overarching, is issuing executive orders. None of this is constitutional. None of this meets the tests that the founders would have applied to their actions right now, and they are all grossly unconstitutional. You know, the original vision was that the House of Representatives was to be the democratic aspect of our government, that element that was voted on directly by the people. You elected those representatives, simple majority wins the representatives in a race, in a contest. He wins by simple majority and goes and represents that district for 2 short years.
Right.
Okay. The Senate was originally envisioned as being and constituted as a body that was elected and selected by the state legislatures.
Exactly.
And the senators, the federal senators, were meant to represent the states as states. That's why each state gets 2 senators.
Equal representation of all the states, large and small.
Right, and what you're hearing people say is that, well, gee, why should states, low population states, have 2 senators? Because by God, that's the idea of having the state itself get representation as a state, okay? And that's to act as a check against the federal government and against the usurpations of power by the tyranny of the majority in that state, which is, and counterbalances the House of Representatives. Yep. Okay, and then the executive branch was to serve as the check on those, and the judicial branch. So these are things that you can educate yourself about.
Absolutely,
right.
And they're not that difficult.
They're not that difficult, but boy, are they powerful. They are the mechanisms and the reason this country has been so successful and so prosperous these last 250 years.
Absolutely are. You know, I was listening to Larry Kudlow the other day, and Larry Kudlow's been around Washington for a long time, served in various capacities.
He's an okay guy, but a semi-swamp creature.
A semi-swamp creature, and he's got a radio show, and I was listening to that, and he was interviewing Senator Bill Hagerty about Hagerty's vote against the infrastructure bill. Mm-hmm. And Kudlow went on to say, he said that he knows a bunch of those who put the bill together, the bipartisan bill together. And he said, they're friends and associates, and I know they mean well. That's what Kudlow said.
Yeah, well, he knows more than I think most of us think is true.
I was actually furious when he said that, because no, they don't. They do not mean well. What we have is 554 individuals. That's the Senate, that's the House, that's the Executive, and that's the Supreme Court. We have 554 individuals right now who are taking this country into a communist anarchy, into a communist-dominated regime. You can't. There's just no other way you can look at it.
Right.
You can't say, well, this is just the left, and the pendulum swings. No. We've seen over the years that the communist insurrection in this country has been going on for many, many, many years.
Right, it's been a little bit beneath the radar.
And while social norms may swing that pendulum, the communist march never relents, never backs up, never gives ground. You look at Nancy Pelosi. She is an apparatus of the communist mechanism going on in this country. We will have this bill. We will pass this bill whether you know what's in it or not. We're going to pass it not knowing what's in it. How many times has she said that?
Well, or consider passing bills by reconciliation.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just ramming something through a completely illegitimate process, to avoid having to deal with the supermajority that's required in the Senate to get bills through, which is, again, a very good check against majoritarian whim.
It is.
Okay.
In fact, I fully advocate a supermajority requirement on not just budget bills.
Every bill.
On every bill. Every bill that comes through Congress, it should take at least 80% of the bodies voting for that.
Right.
I firmly believe that. People say, well, we never get anything done.
Well, that's fine.
That's grounds to celebrate right there. I'd break out a bottle of champagne myself.
One of the things I've always respected about the Texas state legislature is they only meet every other year.
And that's
probably too often.
You got that right.
I mean, we talk about this as a recurrent theme of mine anyway, but I'm going to say it because I think sometimes repetition bears fruit, and I think it's important to repeat certain concepts. But I mean, I think the political class, by their very nature, throughout history, are self-aggrandizing grifters.
Yes,
okay?
Yes, they are.
A few of them have noble intent, but they're human beings, okay? And human beings, look, All one has to do is be associated with the simplest unit of government in the world, a homeowners association, to figure out how people, and I've done that, and I can tell you, people love the idea of commandeering other people's money and spending it in ways that somehow always manage to end up benefiting them, okay? And they become somewhat authoritarian in the problem. Oh, you can't have this, and I understand, to the extent that the covenants and the bylaws are analogous to our governing documents in this country. Yeah. But I'm telling you, my overarch here is that these people are horrible people, fundamentally. Yeah. And so politicians just are not what you want running your life.
That's right.
And the founders understood that, and they created a document and a governing structure in the society that limited their influence in your life, and we are just walking away from that, and you're not going to like the result. I mean, you already ought to not be liking the result, but it's going to get worse.
That's right. That's exactly right. And with that, we got to take a little commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the pushback going on numerous things.
High time.
And various other things.
High time.
Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Hey, this is John Woodruff of Premier Equipment Company in Rocky Mountain Infield. Been shopping for a zero-turn mower lately. You've probably noticed that inventory is getting hard to come by. So come on down and see what we've got. We've got a showroom full. We have a showroom full of Exmark and Grasshopper zero-turn mowers. Everything from commercial to residential, everything in between. We've got a good relationship with our distributors. They tell us when we sell these, they've got more on the way. If you've been in the market for a zero-turn mower, come see me, John Woodruff from Premier Equipment.
Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we're back, and as promised, we're going to talk a little bit about the pushback that's beginning in this country, and I'm glad to see it.
Likewise.
Because I'm going to tell you, government is the tyranny of a minority, really, because it's only 554 individuals that ruin our lives on a daily basis.
And it's sort of a dark matter bureaucracy out there that sort of permeates the entire ecosystem, which is very, very pernicious.
And that's inclusive of the media.
Yep.
Because this is a little off topic, but if you remember, Nancy Pelosi told the media that they were not doing their job in selling this infrastructure bill.
Just recently. I mean, this past week.
Just this past week. And to me, that tells me that everything we saw for the last 4 years was orchestrated by the communist Democrats, the communist progressives, Nancy Pelosi, Charles Schumer, Nadler, Schiff to Schiff. All of these people are orchestrating this, and the government entities, the government elected officials, use the media to push their agenda. And that agenda is moving us toward communism outright.
Well, all one had to do to really see that the media was getting their talking points almost directly. I mean, it's like they had a hotline directly to DNC.
Yeah.
You can see these Rush Limbaugh used to do these very effectively. He'd do these montages of the phraseology coming forth, issuing forth from the various media, and to a entity, to an organization, they would each utter the exact same phraseology. I mean, in a court of law, you would say, well, they're clearly reading off the same sheet.
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
It was comical, because there'd be like 30 of these little phrases, and so there's no question that the media is almost entirely a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democratic National Committee and the Democrat political apparatus in general in this country. That's just obvious as the rather large nose on my face. So yeah,
it's interesting because one of the things about investigating incidents, whether it's the police, whether it's a safety incident, an injury, anything like that, If every one of them tells you the same story, you know they're lying.
That's correct.
Because they've all gotten together and they made up their story and they're sticking
correct.
to it. Because no group of people is going to have the same take on everything.
Spontaneously come up with the exact same. That's correct.
That's right. So we know that the media is on the payroll, so to speak.
Yeah.
And we see it all the time.
Well, they're trained operatives.
They're trained operatives.
Trained in these universities, these communist universities, which
Exactly.
is exactly what they've become. That's where we really dropped the ball in this
Yeah.
country in the last 30, 40 years.
Absolutely is.
Without a fight, we just ceded that territory.
When Senator Joseph McCarthy said that there were communists in the universities, communist professors, and accused professors of being communists, he wasn't wrong.
He was absolutely correct.
He was absolutely correct. Now, that day it was much more secretive, but now we have college professors who just make no bones about it, that they are communists, socialists, and anarchists.
When I was in college in 1982, I took a history class, and the professor, the first thing that came out of his mouth was this. He was one of these typical sort of arrogant guys, with the smoking jacket and the whole look, and all the girls were, And he announced that he was a Western European style socialist, and that was the perspective. I think, oh God, really already? I mean, that was in the mid '80s.
Well, thank goodness we have some people pushing back against some of these things. Not enough, but it's beginning. And sometimes it takes a little while for that snowball to build critical mass. And I'm hoping that it will build critical mass. The state of Florida has fined one of the counties in Florida $3.5 million for violations of the law against vaccine passports.
Very good.
So a county in Florida decided, well, we're going to demand vaccine passports because we don't want these unvaccinated people, killing the rest of us.
Right.
Well, they got hit with a $3.5 million fine. And I don't know about your counties, but I know that the counties around here, $3.5 million fine, that's pretty hefty. I'm glad to see it.
Might be able to pay a utility bill or two with it. I don't know.
In Australia even they're pushing back. And Australia is really, they have just gone way overboard with their draconian lockdowns. They've got an app on your phone over there that you have to verify where you are at any given time. You go outside, they send a SWAT team in to arrest you. You take your child somewhere, and they seize your child to give them the vaccine.
Yeah, very surprising from a population I always thought of as sort of like honorary Americans, very hardy and sort of robust and carving out that existence down there in that really inhospitable little island continent.
Yeah, if you look at the population of Australia and look at where the population centers are, it's not broad and widespread.
Well,
it's very
people
concentrated.
People may not know there's only 25 million people in Australia. I thought, that's only a little more than half the population of California.
Yeah.
I always thought it was, substantially larger. So,
And they, I always thought of them as being rugged individuals.
Likewise. Turns out they're a bunch of pansies.
Yeah, they're treating their protesters like foreign invaders. So some of the police are even quitting. We got a call. Let's take this call. Good evening, caller. What's on your mind this evening?
Well, enjoying the show, gentlemen.
Good. Thank you.
Enjoying what you're saying. That's correct. But I think your viewers are a little behind time. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights are history. We are now in socialism. And the next move is to go to globalism.
Yep.
So I'll keep watching. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for calling. You have a good evening, too.
Well, I'm glad he steered us in that direction because that ultimately is the goal of all this is a globalist superstructure.
Yeah.
And then another point that needs to be made. This is maybe got glossed over here, but these communist movements are really movements of the super wealthy.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the thing that I think is lost. Everybody thinks that the communist and socialist movements are these redistribute the wealth programs. No, they are consolidate and control the wealth programs.
Exactly.
Okay, and there's always a 1 or 2% at the top. People complain about the 1 or 2% in this country. Yeah, there's always a 1 or 2%, and this country has that, but they don't control the guns. Okay, they don't. We control the guns in this country vis-a-vis the Second Amendment. The 1 or 2% of these communist countries run everything from the top down. and the rest of the population are serfs and peons.
Exactly.
Very little ability to create wealth and live a comfortable
They
life.
completely eliminate the middle class, and if we notice, the attack right now is on the middle class.
That's right.
They've taken the poor and the low-income individuals and the extremely wealthy, and I mean wealthy, $300+ million.
Sure.
Off the representative salary, Nancy Pelosi, and
Yeah.
the other whose names are not in the news all the time,
Right.
those behind the scenes. But they've taken these people and turned them against the middle class.
Which they've always what they've done is that they've hyper subsidized the poor. So
Yep.
they are automatically, gonna side with these
tool.
because that's where they get their sustenance.
Yep.
Okay.
That makes
so
them
you've
a
got
tool.
you've got a hyper subsidized, very poor, segment,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got a hyper rich. Okay, and both of those are at the ends of the economic spectrum are supporting these communist movements.
Absolutely are.
Well, that may surprise some people about the rich, but if you look throughout history, it's really not a surprise.
No, it's absolutely not a surprise.
Yeah.
There's numerous kinds of slavery, modern day slavery.
Right.
You don't have to be in chains. You don't have to be on the plantation. But when you have government controlling every aspect of your life, that is slavery.
For example, monitoring a $600 transaction.
Exactly.
The IRS to monitor
Exactly.
$600 transactions.
That really infuriates me.
That's an unbelievable transgression.
It is beyond imagination that they would want that degree of control. I'm going to tell you the truth. The IRS gets way too much information as it is. Because the bottom line is this. They talk about the rich. Oh, we got to have, 60,000 more IRS
I thought it was
agents.
80,000.
It might have been. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. It's just a tremendous number. It's an unthinkable number.
87,000, I think, was the number I heard they want to hire.
To go out and audit people because they know people are cheating on their taxes.
Right.
Well, do you think they're going to target the Nancy Pelosi's who are worth $333 million plus?
Inexplicably, how she achieved that wealth.
Inexplicably on a representative salary.
Yeah, right.
You think they're going to go after them? No. They're going to go after the hardworking people making $100,000, $150,000 a year because they can't spend $200,000 hiring an attorney and an accounting firm to clear that up.
Right.
They're going to go after the people who say, well, darn, that's another $40,000. I can't fight this, I got to pay it.
That's right.
That's what they're going after.
That's right.
They're going after you. They're not going after the big wheels.
Right.
This is such a lie that they're targeting the rich. Oh, we're going to get all this money from the rich because this infrastructure bill is paid for. It's paid for in the taxes we're going to take.
Yeah, well, first of all, those are all just flat
No,
out.
that's the most idiotic thing I have ever heard.
First of all, to say that it doesn't cost anything to take money out of the economy, and whatever you say about rich people, their money's in the economy.
Exactly.
Once they bought the nice homes, which in and of itself contributes to the economy, but once the so-called rich, and in this context, I'm talking about what I call the working rich. I'm talking about people that earn, $200,000 to $500,000 a year. That's where the bulk of taxes come from. Okay.
Absolutely.
They don't come from people like Warren Buffett because he doesn't really pay income tax because he doesn't really have an income. He has assets and wealth. Okay. And it certainly doesn't come from people making much less than 65,
Right.
50.
Oh, yeah.
By the time they do the deductions and everything else, their net tax liability is pretty much zero most of the time.
That's absolutely
Comes
correct.
out of that slice of people, the ones I call the working rich, people who work very, very hard or have studied very hard or sacrificed in some major way either to grow a business or get a professional degree or whatever it is they've done to create a fairly substantial income. That's who they want to go after, and they already pay that slice of people, that 10% of the population already pay 80%, 70 to 80% of all the income taxes.
Yeah.
Okay, so to say they're not paying their fair share is outrageous.
It is.
And of course, they want to go after the corporations and raise the corporate rate from 21% to like 26.
Yes, because we all know that it would be absurd and immoral if they passed that along to their consumers.
Right, according to
Unbelievable.
Jen Psaki, the luminary at the podium, speaking for the president.
Yeah. First of all, what does she think corporations and businesses operate on? Does she think that these people go out and start a business based on charity?
Yeah, well,
I mean, yeah, there are plenty of nonprofits out there, but nonprofits still have to get their revenue from somewhere, and typically
Right.
they're getting it from grants, taking our tax dollars, but that's neither here nor there. The bottom line is, if you go into business, you go into business to make a profit.
well, that's right. But the thing is, people don't ever take into account, they like to say, well, everybody works hard. You just happen to, yeah, but people don't take risk.
Right.
Okay.
That's
And that's
exactly right.
People either make huge sacrifices to do certain things that take out big chunks of their life and make them pay in other ways, like foregoing families, that kind of thing, or they take big risk.
Absolutely.
Okay. And most business owners, really, they take big risks, and usually they fail. The statistics are that business,
Small businesses, yeah,
they
it's
fail.
90%
Right.
fail in the first
Right.
5 years.
They go and borrow against their houses, and they max out their credit cards. They still fail, and they got to
Yeah.
deal with all that debt. And the people who were successful, they took those risks, and somehow they're immediately judged as being, hoarding all the wealth. When in fact they're creating the wealth.
Yeah.
Wealth has to be created by somebody. Okay. Now, I know that the politics of envy and resentment are running strong right now.
Yeah.
But you're not thinking about it right if you got it in your head that, gee, this guy has more, therefore I have less, because it's not true. You got to look at what you have compared to what people have had in the past.
Right.
And in this society, when it's run and administered primarily with fealty to the Constitution and using basic free market principles, wealth is created.
It is.
Okay.
Well, look at 4 years ago.
Right.
Look at the previous administration. Wages, low income, middle class wages were rising faster than I can't remember in many, many years. The poverty level of the lowest income and minorities
Right.
was decreasing.
Decreasing substantially.
I mean, they were, he was
And-
bringing people up out of poverty.
And the revenues into the Treasury were actually increasing because of increased economic activity.
They were.
But these people that's not really their issue. They're not trying to raise money when they
Right.
take these taxes. They're trying to engineer a just society from their distorted left-wing
Exactly.
communist perspective of what they judge as being fair and,
Exactly.
and just. Fact of the matter is, most of the spending is generated by inflation, by printing money, and the taxes have very little to do with how they spend money.
Absolutely.
And they're getting ready to run us down a rabbit hole of inflation that I think people really are going to be shocked if they aren't already.
Inflation and shortages.
Yeah.
Everybody looks at these shortages and says, oh, well, it's because of COVID. Well, actually, no, it's not. California mandated that you could not drive a diesel rig on their roads. It was any older than 2016, 2011.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Diesel rigs, generally they last a good many years if they're well maintained. They mandated that. They mandated it by I can't remember what the year was, sometime in 2026, you got to have electric trucks,
Right.
which are not even on the road yet. So they're mandating something that doesn't even exist functionally at this point. So people are not buying brand new rigs. Those rigs are expensive.
Oh, absolutely.
You're looking at $200,000+ for a nice rig and
Oh,
trailer.
definitely, yeah.
So people are not investing in those. The trucking companies aren't investing in those. They have gone to union mandates. Non-union truckers can't drive into the ports in California.
Of course, they've made it impossible to do business
They've made
profitably.
it impossible to do business.
Or even break even.
Impossible.
Right.
They have put so many fees, so many mandates, so many regulations. That's why many of these ships are not getting unloaded.
Well, I'm hopeful, and I rarely am, so this is a point of inflection here maybe on the show. But I'm hopeful that, again, one of the hallmarks of all these authoritarians is they're arrogant,
Yeah.
and they're power hungry, but they're largely also incompetent frequently.
We can see that
Right.
from the current situation where
That's right, and much of what they do is generated from the faculty lounge at these Ivy League universities where they've never really actually done a real thing in their entire lives. I'm hopeful that these supply chain shortages, which are going to be ubiquitous and across the board, will make people realize, gee, maybe we shouldn't have completely outsourced our manufacturing in this country to China largely, okay? And we talk about China a lot, but that's what all this is part of too. It's an overall global adoption of the China model, which is what these elites like. You know, they like to be able to just say, well, we're going to do this, and that's all there is to it.
Yep.
And a little bit of just enough capitalism in there, or free markets to allow some creation of wealth, but fundamentally you're under their thumb. I'm hoping that people start to realize that, gee, you know, I can't even buy antibiotics because all the components are made in China. And this might serve to because that's one of the things Trump was doing as well. He was resurrecting the manufacturing sector in this country.
Yes, he was. I can't remember how many companies moved back or were planning to move back, but it was a tremendous number.
Well, that's right. And I don't know. I mean, this is one of those things that, you know, you can get into a deep philosophical discussion. I mean, wealth is a product of the mind. We decide what we put value on and what we think has value. You know, we ascribe value to gold for various reasons, but it's fundamentally a human characteristic to put value on things because of our intellect.
Yep.
Okay. Well, right now we seem to have abandoned the idea that making things is valuable, and we've really gone down this information society. Now, granted, you know, an entity like Facebook, it has value, but I'm not sure that not making things isn't still highly detrimental. And
absolutely.
Right. And the plan has been, the thing that's been executed has been, well, we're going to offshore all the making of actual things to other people, and we're going to be the kings of the information. Yeah. Well, of course, as they promoted themselves to the kings of information, they've also established a monopoly on it, and they've outsourced the public square to these private companies like Facebook and big tech, and now we don't even have freedom of speech in this country anymore.
That's right. We're going to talk about this a little bit more when we come back, but we got to take a little break right now. You're watching America in Danger. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is Nicholas Bellamy at Premier Equipment. I'm going to talk about the 4540 Mahindra. It's 38 horsepower, full cylinder engine. The weight of this tractor is 4,000 pounds. This tractor is perfect for bush hogging, distance, small garden, a hunting club tractor. Comes with a 7-year warranty, 2-year bumper to bumper, additional 5-year on the powertrain. You can have this tractor for $200 a month, and we have 20 of these tractors in stock. Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we are back, and we were talking about the outsourcing of America.
Yeah.
And, you know, I remember back many years ago when economists were touting that we were swiftly becoming a service economy and that we didn't need manufacturing and we needed to ship those dirty jobs to somewhere else. And back then I didn't agree with it. I said, you know, a service economy is one thing, but if you can't make ordinary goods that you need on a daily basis or in an emergency situation, you're in a bind.
That's right.
It's kind of like the hierarchy of needs I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't have basic things, I mean, you go to Lowe's, look on the shelves in Lowe's, go to the electrical department in Lowe's and try and find some boxes and various.
I've been looking for some things that I can't find.
Yeah, they're not there.
They're not there.
I mean, there are many shortages going on right now. And I've got the feeling we're going to see more yet to come, unfortunately. I hate that.
Well, I hate it, but like I was saying in the last segment, maybe it'll cause a little bit of a national epiphany that, hey, you know, really we need to have manufacturing in this country. We can be the leaders. We can be the leaders of the information age. We are, and we have been. But we should have our own integrated circuit chip foundries in this
Yes,
society.
indeed.
We should manufacture our own plastic components, our own drugs and pharmaceuticals. There's no reason we can't do that.
No.
The only reason they do it in China is because they have no environmental regulations and they use slave labor. Okay, environmental regulations in this country are off the charts. They're designed to inhibit business. Okay, they're designed to basically foment this outsourcing of our manufacturing capability to other parts of the world. And I just, I've heard all the arguments and I understand, but I fundamentally do not believe that if you don't make your own things, that you can remain a first-rate power.
I agree.
What about your you're going to rely on other entities around the world for your military hardware?
Yeah.
That seems fundamentally suicidal.
Well, it is, especially when that entity is your avowed enemy.
Well, I wouldn't trust my self-defense to anybody because the whole point of self-defense is it's defense of the self against any enemy that and your friend today may not be your friend tomorrow.
Well, that's right.
I'm gonna rely on my buddy to hold my firearms for me. What happens when he's not my buddy anymore?
Think so. Right, exactly. Well, a prime example of that is having the Taliban run security around Kabul airport when Biden bungled the evacuation of Americans when he shut down that whole operation over there.
If you really believe that was a bungle and not a purposeful.
Well, it was purposeful.
That's
absolutely.
right.
It appears to be a bungling, but it was purposeful.
Absolutely.
They did exactly what they intended to do.
Nobody's that stupid.
No.
No.
Those people are incompetent. They're basically grifters. We got a lot of beta males running government right now.
Yeah.
But they knew exactly what they were doing.
Right. Well, there's some leadership at the top that understands exactly what they're trying to achieve here.
Absolutely.
And there's just simply no two ways about it. They're trying to deconstruct the United States, take it down sufficiently to where they can, more readily incorporate it into this global structure that they want. And they've done a lot of damage in 8 or 9 short months. It really is quite a thing to behold.
Absolutely have. But we were talking about the shortages in this country. And I can't help but think back to some of the protests that I've seen in the past where these people are running down this country, running down this nation, running down the middle class, running down white Americans, running down white men especially.
Right.
And talking about how horrible it is and how horrible this country is and how this country needs to fundamentally change. And I think back just a couple years ago and you walk into the store and shelves are full.
That's correct.
Pretty much get whatever you wanted to get.
Yeah.
And I would say, 3 years ago, taxes were pretty reasonable. The economy was going pretty well.
Yep.
Manufacturers were coming back to this country. We were exporting oil and gas.
Right. We were energy independent and a net energy exporter for the first time in a long time in this country. Yeah. All exclusively because of Trump policies.
Absolutely. And you fast forward to this administration, who on day one issued 60 executive orders, undoing everything that had been done in the Trump administration, and undoing some things that really I don't think he had constitutional authority to do.
Well, shutting down the pipeline was a bad one, and the border. Right. He ended the Remain in Mexico policy. Now, I know you're aware that a federal judge has ruled that they have to go back to that, and they're actually claim they're going to starting next week.
Yeah, I heard an idiotic remark on that, and it came out of the administration. I can't remember which one it was, whether it was Blinken or one of them. He said
certainly could have been any one of them.
It could have been any one of them, but he said, "Well, we're going to do this, but Mexico has to agree with it."
Yeah.
And
I heard
my
that.
thought was, no, Mexico doesn't have to agree with anything.
That's right.
You just keep them across the river. You don't let them into this country.
You don't let them in.
Mexico has nothing to do with it.
Right. They can deal with it however they want.
Part of the problem.
That's correct. And they can deal with it however they want.
However they choose to deal with it.
That's right.
But stop them at the border. We saw that taking place with Trump. We saw that the illegals coming across, the gotaways, then the caught, was at the lowest point in years. And now we're on tap for 2.2 million.
Yeah, they've upgraded it to 2.4 for this year.
Oh my God, I hadn't even heard that. 2.4 million. That's not the gotaways.
That's right. That's just the one they've let in.
That's the catch and release.
Yeah, catch and release.
That are coming in unvaccinated, talk about the vax against the unvaccinated.
Yeah.
What's going on, people?
Right.
You're demanding I get a vaccine. You're demanding everybody get a vaccine.
But you're purposely distributing people who have been unvaccinated, coming from third world countries, and you're flying them and transporting to different parts of the country. That almost seems like you might want to continue fomenting and creating spikes of COVID outbreaks in different parts of the country.
Yep.
I don't know. Is that possible? I think it is.
Well, I fully believe it is because I showed the graphic. I showed the tracking on how COVID cases were diminishing. And yet, as soon as the administration really focused on transferring these people around the country, knowing
That's right.
that fully 20% are infected with some disease. Many, there were some cases where 80% were infected with COVID. Shipping around the country, you're going to tell me that that is not a malicious, intended spread of COVID?
Yeah, I agree.
I cannot believe it's otherwise. I cannot believe it's otherwise.
Part of a multi-pronged attack.
Multi-pronged attack. And, you know, we saw for a while that the media was trying to whip up a little fear and anticipation about talking about these other variants, the Lambda variant. We gotta watch that Lambda variant. Gotta watch that Lambda variant. I was wondering what happened to all the variants
All the
between
Greek letters
Delta
between.
and Lambda.
Right.
You know, there are some letters between.
And they're epsilon and
yeah. I mean,
Gamma
I can't recite the Greek alphabet, but I know that Lambda is not after Delta.
No, it's not. There's a bunch of them in between there.
What happened to those? I guess those were okay, you know, but we were told to watch out for the Lambda variant. Well,
maybe we're using the Hawaiian Greek alphabet. I don't know. 12 letters.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But I fully believe that what they were hoping was that some other variant would be slipped in this mass distribution of COVID-infected illegal aliens. I can't help but think otherwise. You can call me conspiratorial if you want, but...
Well, again, we talk about Occam's razor.
There you go.
The method of analysis that says that the simplest explanation is probably the most likely one. The one with the fewest assumptions. So you've got people in charge of this country right now who've expressed open contempt for the country's founding and for the policies that this country has pursued over the last couple hundred years, actually.
Yep.
Okay. And they're very much of an open borders crowd, and they very much want to change the demographics of this country to suit their voting objectives, their electoral objectives. So to me, it's just prima facie evidence right there that they are purposely allowing folks in, and they're purposely using them as COVID positive vectors.
As vectors,
okay, to distribute that disease, continue distributing that disease around the country so they can continue with the voting irregularities, the pandemic voting mechanisms which they want to codify, and they've tried to codify, but that's how they manipulate these elections. Yeah, it probably wasn't Dominion voting machines that stole it. What it was just allowing massive mail-in ballots and ballot harvesting. Okay, that's where the fraud was. And make no mistake, it was fraud.
Yeah. Well, you know, interesting. You know, in California, they've granted illegals driver's license. Right. Well, California also has motor voter registration.
Right.
So you're registered to vote as soon as you get a driver's license. Now, I don't think that they're asking if you have citizenship and the right to vote.
No, they're not.
So they're immediately putting illegals on the voting rolls out there.
Right.
And they're not the only state doing that.
That's correct.
There are numerous states that do that. They grant a driver's license. With the driver's license, you go get a voter registration card. You don't have to show proof of citizenship.
Right.
You show your driver's license. I've never had to show a birth certificate or a passport.
Oh, there's not right.
Go to register to vote.
I mean, look, we've discussed this on the show, but we actually voted in this state on a constitutional amendment to our North Carolina Constitution requiring voter ID, and a 3-judge panel in this state shut it down.
Yeah.
And said it's not. They rejected it. Well, I don't even see how that happens,
No,
frankly.
I don't either. And that was a 2-to-1 decision.
That was a 2-to-1 decision, and if I'm not mistaken, there were some shenanigans there with how they engineered the panel to be able to get what they wanted there. Yeah,
exactly. You know, I was thinking earlier, we were talking about, you know, the founders and how upset they would be if they saw what was going on right now. And it made me think of something, and this is completely off topic, completely off schedule, but, you know, I couldn't help but think, well, you know, if they saw what was going on now, they'd want to hold another constitutional convention.
right.
They would say, wait, we got to make sure some of these things aren't allowed, period. We got to delineate those and define those. And I couldn't help but think about the effort right now for the Constitutional Convention.
Right, the Convention of States. Right.
Now, totally different reasoning behind that.
Yeah.
Totally different reasoning behind that.
And wholly misguided.
Wholly misguided and not a good thing. Now, if the founders were here, Franklin, Madison, Jefferson, all of those individuals that came up with the original one, I'd say, yeah, let's go for it. We don't have that.
Although I suspect what they would say is, you know what, we wrote a new constitution. It turned out it was just like the old one.
It was
identical to the one we created in 1787.
With the exception of we moved the Second Amendment to the first.
That's right. That's right. We moved it, made it number one, and we spelled out a little more explicitly how you qualify for voting rights.
Exactly. And if you don't have a stake in it, if you don't have skin in the game, you don't vote.
Yeah, you don't vote. That's right.
You don't vote. Pure and simple. If you're an illegal alien, you never vote.
That's right.
And, I'd be perfectly fine with these people coming into this country, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
If there were a provision that said, okay, yeah, you come into this country, if you ultimately get citizenship or don't get citizenship, you can never vote in a federal. You can never vote in an election.
You nor 3 generations of your progeny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then bring it on.
That's all right.
And plus, you get no social support. You get no welfare.
Right.
You get no subsidies. Period.
Well, that's often been the libertarian argument in the past. They say, well, we're for open borders. But, okay, you can't have open borders on a welfare state.
Exactly.
And to be completely fair, there were times in the history of this country where we wanted to grow the population. We had very liberal immigration policies. Yeah. We wanted to grow the country. We don't need to grow it anymore, not with people who aren't going to contribute in any way.
Exactly right.
People in the past came to this country to work hard and carve out something and create something. All right. People coming here now are largely coming here to avail themselves of free health care, free medical benefits, well, that's redundant, free education, okay, and a whole panoply of taxpayer-provided services, okay, which really is just going to drain this country's ability to function. And that's really the purpose of the...
It is, and it's orchestrated from on high.
It is, that's right.
It wasn't that many years ago. I remember it was really... It was suppressed by the news, but it was a scandal among people who understood these things. The U.S. Department of Agriculture actually published it was like a comic book in Spanish, explaining to illegals, these were given out at the border, explaining to illegals how to navigate the social welfare system in this country, how to sign up for benefits, how to apply for housing, how to apply for medical. So we see it's being done from on high.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's really a communist insurrection, and I'm 100% serious about that. And I would argue that any day of the week that we are in a communist insurrection right
no
now.
question. The people and the people that are in charge of the White House, that group, they are just full on 100% Marxists. There's no question about
absolutely
it.
Are.
I don't want to. You really can't sugarcoat it. Most people want to say, "Oh, well, they're progressive. They lean left." No nonsense. These people are communists.
They are.
Okay, and
they are devout Marxists.
That's right, devout Marxists, and they see themselves as serving. They see the United States as the source of all the problems in the world. And I think most of these folks actually have some form of deep-seated psychological issues that foment all this resentment in their psyches. They just really don't understand.
As do I.
Yeah, because none of their actions actually make sense when you judge it objectively. Yeah. Why would you want to destroy the greatest wealth-producing and freest country in the world?
In the world, that's right. That's exactly right. And with that, we got to close. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to assure you that people are pushing back, and I want you to push back as you can in any little way.
Any little way.
Push back. We need pushback. When our politicians come to town, call them on the carpet.
Right.
Don't go shake their hand and say, "Oh, you're a wonderful, good old boy."
Right.
Go tell them, what are you doing?
Right.
Why are you letting these communists take over this country?
Exactly.
Push back.
Please.
Push back, push back.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week for more America in Danger. I'm Robert Cressionnie.
I'm John Gatsis.
Have a great week. Good night.
Night.
you.